I saw my brother Derek the moment I walked into the funeral home. He was standing near the guest book, greeting people in his expensive suit, playing the role of dutiful son. When he spotted me, his face hardened. "What are you doing here, Alex?" "Paying my respects to Dad." I kept my voice neutral, though my heart was pounding. "You lost that right 5 years ago when you walked out on this family." Derek moved to block my path. "When you chose your lifestyle over your father. I chose to be honest about who I am. That's not the same thing. You chose to be gay and throw it in Dad's face. You chose to bring your—" He couldn't even say the word. "Your partner to family events even after Dad made it clear it wasn't acceptable. You chose your agenda over family unity. I chose authenticity over pretending to be someone I'm not. Well, Dad chose to cut you off, completely. Changed his will, removed you from family photos, told everyone you were dead to him. So you have no right to be here now, pretending you cared about a father you abandoned." People were starting to stare. Dad's friends, business associates, family members I hadn't seen in 5 years, all watching the confrontation. "I didn't abandon Dad. He kicked me out for being gay. There's a difference. He gave you a choice. Stop flaunting your lifestyle or leave. You chose to leave. That's on you." My sister Melissa appeared, her face carefully neutral. "Derek, not here. Not now. No, this needs to be said. Alex walked away from this family. He doesn't get to show up now that Dad's dead and pretend he belongs here. This is for real family only. I'm his son," I said quietly. "I was his son when he told me I was an abomination. I was his son when he threw me out at 19. I'm still his son now that he's dead. You don't get to erase that. Dad erased it, legally. You're not in his will. You're not listed as next of kin. You're nobody to this family." "Then why did his lawyer specifically call me and tell me I needed to be here?" The words came out before I could stop them. Derek's face went from angry to confused. "What?" "Mr. Patterson called me 3 days ago. Said Dad's will had specific instructions that I attend the funeral and be present for the reading, that my presence was mandatory." "That's impossible. Dad cut you out of everything. Did he? Or is that what you assumed?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the voicemail from Dad's lawyer. "Listen for yourself." Derek listened to Mr. Patterson's voice. "Alex Thornton, this is Richard Patterson, your father's attorney. Your father's will contains specific provisions that require your attendance at both the funeral and the will reading on Friday at 2 p.m. Please confirm receipt of this message." "I don't understand," Derek said, his certainty wavering. "Dad told me he'd removed you from everything. He said you were dead to him." "Maybe he said that, or maybe you heard what you wanted to hear." The funeral service was tense. Derek had reluctantly allowed me to stay, but he'd made sure I sat in the back row, far from family. Melissa had given me an apologetic look, but didn't fight for me to sit closer. She'd always been the peacekeeper, unwilling to take sides. The minister talked about Dad's life, his successful law practice, his devotion to family, his strong faith. He carefully didn't mention that Dad had disowned his youngest son for being gay. Didn't acknowledge that Dad's devotion to family had meant rejecting one of his children entirely. After the burial, we gathered at Mr. Patterson's office for the will reading. Derek had tried to exclude me, but Mr. Patterson had been firm. "Alex must be present. Your father's instructions were explicit." We sat in the conference room, Derek and his wife Jennifer, Melissa and her husband Tom, and me alone on the opposite side. Derek kept shooting me hostile looks, clearly furious that I was there. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. Your father left very specific instructions about how this will should be read. He wanted everyone present to hear it together, in its entirety, with no advance disclosure. So please hold your questions until I finish." He began reading the legal preamble, then moved to the specific bequests. To my daughter Melissa, I leave $200,000 and my collection of rare books. You were always the peacemaker, always trying to keep everyone happy. I'm grateful for that, though I sometimes wonder if you were too afraid of conflict to stand up for what was right. To my son Derek, I leave $200,000 in my law practice, which you've been managing for the past decade. You were exactly the son I thought I wanted, successful, respectable, holding the same values I was raised with. You never challenged me, never questioned my beliefs, never made me uncomfortable. I was proud of that. I'm not sure I should have been. Derek looked confused by that last line, but nodded at the inheritance of the practice he'd been running. Mr. Patterson continued, "To my youngest son, Alex." "This is ridiculous," Derek interrupted. "Dad cut him off. He doesn't get anything." "Please let me finish," Mr. Patterson said calmly. "Your father was very clear about his wishes." He continued reading, "To my youngest son, Alex, who I disowned 5 years ago for being gay, who I threw out of my house when he was 19, who I told was dead to me, I leave the bulk of my estate, the house, my investment portfolio, my retirement accounts, and all remaining assets. Current value is approximately $4.2 million. The room exploded. Derek stood up so fast, his chair flew backward. "That's insane. Dad wouldn't. He told me Alex was cut out. He said, 'Please sit down, Derek, there's more.'" Mr. Patterson's voice was firm. "Your father included an explanation. He wanted you all to hear it." Derek sat, his face red with rage. Mr. Patterson pulled out another document and began reading. "To my children, if you're hearing this, I'm dead. And there are things I need to say that I didn't have the courage to say while living. 5 years ago, my son Alex came out as gay. Told me he was in love with another man, brought his boyfriend Marcus to a family dinner to introduce him. I reacted badly. I told Alex that homosexuality was a sin, that he was choosing a destructive lifestyle, that I couldn't support his choice. I told him he needed to choose, get right with God and leave the gay lifestyle, or get out of my house and my family. Alex left. He chose authenticity over my approval. He chose to be himself rather than pretend to be someone I could accept. I told everyone he was dead to me. I removed him from my will. I cut off all contact. I even changed my emergency contact information to list only Derek and Melissa. And when people asked about my youngest son, I said I had 2 children, not 3. I thought I was being righteous. I thought I was standing firm in my faith. I thought I was being a man of principle. I was wrong about everything. 3 years ago, I had a heart attack. A bad one. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and during that time, I had a lot of time to think about my life, my choices, my faith. And I realized something. Jesus spent his time with sinners, outcasts, people the religious establishment rejected. He ate with tax collectors. He defended prostitutes. He touched lepers. He consistently chose compassion over judgment. And I, who claimed to follow Jesus, had done the opposite. I'd chosen judgment over compassion. I'd rejected my own son for not meeting my standards. I'd cared more about looking righteous than about actually loving people. Derek came to visit me in the hospital every day. He brought flowers, sat with me, told me I'd been right to cut off Alex, told me I'd stood firm in my principles, validated all my worst choices. Melissa came too. She was kind, but distant, too afraid to tell me I'd been wrong, too conflicted to fully support what I'd done. Alex didn't come. Why would he? I'd told him he was dead to me. I'd made my choice clear. But Marcus came, Alex's boyfriend, partner I should say, the man I'd refused to acknowledge at that family dinner 3 years earlier. He showed up at the hospital with flowers and a card from Alex. The card said, "Dad, I heard about your heart attack. I hope you recover fully. Despite everything, I still love you. Alex." I asked Marcus why he'd come, why Alex had sent a card when I'd been so cruel to both of them. He said, because Alex is a better person than you've been to him. He loves you even though you rejected him. That's what real love looks like. It doesn't stop just because it's not returned. That conversation changed me, or started to change me. I began reading the Bible differently, reading Jesus' words about love and judgment, reading about the Pharisees who were so concerned with religious rules that they missed the point entirely. I realized I'd been a Pharisee, had valued being right over being loving, had cared more about my version of righteousness than about my relationship with my son. So I tried to reach out to Alex. I called. He didn't answer. I wrote letters. He returned them unopened. I tried to visit him at his apartment. He wouldn't open the door. He'd moved on, built a life without me. And honestly, I couldn't blame him. But I kept trying. Over 3 years, I tried dozens of times to reconnect, to apologize, to tell him I'd been wrong. And Alex rejected every attempt. Finally, 6 months ago, I showed up at his workplace, waited in the lobby until he couldn't avoid me, and I said what I should have said 5 years earlier. I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. Being gay isn't a sin. Loving Marcus isn't wrong. I rejected you because I was more concerned with my reputation and my religious image than with actually loving my son. I chose judgment over love. I chose being right over being kind. And I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I was wrong and you were right. Alex listened. Then he said, "Thank you for saying that. But Dad, you can't undo 5 years of rejection with one apology. You can't erase telling me I was dead to you. I appreciate the apology, but I'm not ready to let you back into my life. Maybe someday, but not yet." That was the last conversation we had. Alex never answered my calls after that, never responded to my letters. I died before he was ready to forgive me, and that's entirely my fault. I destroyed our relationship. He has every right to keep me at a distance. I earned that distance through my cruelty. But I wanted to do something, some final act that might communicate what my words apparently couldn't, that I was wrong, that Alex was right, that being true to yourself is more important than meeting other people's expectations. So I changed my will. Left the bulk of my estate to Alex, not as a bribe. Not to buy forgiveness, but as an acknowledgement. The son I rejected was the one who had the courage to live authentically. The son I cut off was the one who loved me enough to still care when I was in the hospital. The son I said was dead to me was the most alive, most genuine, most brave of all my children. Derek, you'll be angry about this. You'll think Alex doesn't deserve it because he's gay. You'll think I've lost my mind or been manipulated. You haven't learned what I spent 3 years learning, that judgment is easy and love is hard, that being accepted for who you pretend to be is hollow compared to being rejected for who you actually are. You've built your whole life on my approval, on being exactly the son I wanted, and that's sad because you've never had to be brave, never had to stand up for yourself, never had to choose authenticity over acceptance. Alex had to do all of those things. He's stronger for it. Melissa, you'll probably be relieved. You hated the conflict with Alex. You wanted everyone to just get along. But getting along sometimes means standing up for what's right. You were too afraid to tell me I was wrong about Alex. That's something you'll need to work on. Alex, if you're hearing this, I need to say again, I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. Being gay isn't wrong. Loving Marcus isn't wrong. You aren't wrong for being who you are. I'm leaving you my money, not because I think it'll fix what I broke, but because you've earned it through sheer character. You had the courage to live authentically. You had the grace to still love a father who rejected you. You had the strength to protect yourself by keeping me at a distance, even when I finally apologized. Those are the qualities I should have valued. Not Derek's willingness to agree with everything I said. Not Melissa's desperate peacemaking. but your authentic courage. Use the money well, build a good life with Marcus, be happy, and if you can, find a way to forgive an old man who learned too late that love is better than judgment. To all my children, I'm leaving this explanation because I want you to understand. The son I rejected was the one who deserved my respect the most. The son I cut off was the bravest of you all. And the son I told was dead to me is the one who showed me what real love looks like by caring about me, even when I didn't deserve it. Learn from my mistakes. Choose love over judgment. Choose authenticity over approval. And don't wait until you're dying to tell people you were wrong. I love you all. But Alex, I'm especially sorry to you. You deserved a better father. I wish I'd been brave enough to be that father while I had the chance. John Thornton. The conference room was completely silent. Derek's face had gone from red to pale to something like shock. Melissa was crying quietly, and I couldn't breathe. My father had changed, had apologized, had left me everything as some kind of final statement about values and courage and authenticity. And I'd rejected his attempts at reconciliation because I'd been too hurt to risk being hurt again. "There's one more thing," Mr. Patterson said quietly. He handed me an envelope. "Your father asked me to give this to you personally if he died before you reconciled." Inside was a letter in Dad's handwriting, dated 2 months before he died. "Alex, I'm writing this knowing you probably won't read it while I'm alive. You've made it clear you're not ready to forgive me. I understand. I respect that boundary even though it breaks my heart. But I wanted you to know. I'm proud of you. Proud of your courage in coming out. Proud of your relationship with Marcus, who seems like a wonderful man. Proud of your career as a social worker helping LGBTQ youth. Proud of the life you've built without my support or approval. You didn't need my pride. You did it all on your own. But you have it anyway. I'm leaving you my estate not because I think money fixes anything, but because I want my final act to communicate what my words apparently couldn't. You were right. About yourself, about authenticity, about love being more important than religious judgment. And I was wrong. About everything. I don't expect this to fix our relationship. I just wanted you to know that I changed, that I learned, that the last 3 years of my life were spent understanding that the son I rejected was actually the one who had it right all along. I love you, Alex. I'm sorry I didn't show it better when I had the chance. Dad. At my dad's funeral, my brother said I had no right to be there, that Dad had cut me out of everything, that I'd abandoned the family by choosing to be openly gay. Then the lawyer read Dad's will, left me $4.2 million and a letter, explaining that he'd spent the last 3 years learning he'd been wrong, that he'd tried to apologize, tried to reconnect, and I'd kept him at a distance because I wasn't ready to forgive. That his final act was leaving me his estate as acknowledgement. The son he'd rejected for being gay was the bravest of his children. Derek didn't speak to me after the reading, just walked out, his whole worldview shattered. Melissa hugged me, crying, saying she was sorry she'd never stood up for me. I sat in that conference room, holding my father's letter, realizing he'd changed and I'd never known, never given him the chance to prove it, never risked opening the door to reconciliation. Marcus held me while I cried. "He loved you," Marcus said. "He just learned too late. I could have forgiven him. If I'd answered his calls, read his letters, given him one more chance. You protected yourself. You had every right to do that. He hurt you terribly. You don't owe abusers forgiveness just because they apologize. But what if he really changed? What if I missed the chance to have a relationship with the father I always wanted, because I was too afraid to risk getting hurt again?" Marcus didn't have an answer. Neither did I. I used the inheritance to start a foundation for LGBTQ youth who'd been rejected by their families, called it the Second Chance Foundation, for parents who learn too late and kids who need support while they're learning. Derek eventually called, 6 months after the funeral. Said he'd been thinking about Dad's letter, about judgment and love, about how he'd spent his life seeking approval instead of being authentic. "I don't know if I believe you being gay is okay," he admitted. "I was raised the same way Dad was. It's hard to unlearn, but I'm trying, and I'm sorry I said you had no right to be at the funeral. You had every right, more right than anyone, maybe." It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a start. At my dad's funeral, my brother said I didn't belong there. Then Dad's will proved I was the child he'd come to respect most, not for conforming, but for having the courage to be authentic. The inheritance was nice, but the real gift was knowing my father had changed, that he'd learned love was better than judgment, that he'd spent his final years trying to undo the damage he'd done. I just wish he'd learned faster. Wish I'd been braver about forgiving. Wish we'd had more time. But maybe that's the lesson. Don't wait. Don't hold grudges so tightly you miss the chance for reconciliation. Don't let pride keep you from love. My father learned that lesson too late. I learned it just in time. That's what his will taught me. Not the money, the truth. And truth, even when it comes too late, is still worth hearing.